Hello and welcome to another episode of Brains Behind AI. In today's episode, we will talk about how AI can predict and define the experience users have with the content they interact with. We have with us Mark Bainbridge, an industry leader and an authority in the space to tell us more about it. So Natalie, let's introduce Mark to the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Mark. So for the audience, Mark Bainbridge is one of the founders of Dragonfly AI, a predictive visual analytics platform that uses cutting-edge neuroscience to accurately predict how the design of any content or experience influences what your audience sees first across any channel. Mark is also the CEO and founder of Bainbridge Cooper Associates, a marketing and commercial growth consultancy, and co-founder of ProMarketer, an AI suite for the marketing and communication industry. Mark has over 30 years of experience as an award-winning senior leader and CMO across a broad range of industries, from the British Army to banking. The common denominator is that he helps solve reputational challenges. Mark graduated from Cardiff University from the UK. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Hey, Mike, before we dive into the business and what you do as a company, we want to learn a bit about you. What got you thinking about this, and how did the idea came, and when did it happen?
Okay, well, I suppose having spent a long time in a traditional kind of brand environment, so I did marketing roles for the best part of that 30 years. Lucky enough to work on some really, really interesting brand propositions. But I think you realize after doing anything for a long time is that the travel lines you can operate in are reasonably narrow. So although you have a little bit of flexibility around innovation, the reality in quite a lot of instances is that businesses are quite slow to really change. I think when I finished my last what I called proper job, when I was actually on somebody else's payroll, was probably back in about 2010. And I kind of went out into the world thinking what I'd really like to do is, establish all the things that I might not have been able to see from the position I was in. And the problem with a lot of senior marketing people in particular is they kind of get cosseted by the agency supply networks that they build. And it's obviously not necessarily within their interests to show you genuine innovation because it distracts from what they're already offering you. So I think, I came out into the world with a really fresh approach, thinking I'm just really interested to see what's out there that I haven't seen before. And I was honestly absolutely amazed at how much really super smart, particularly creative tech is emerging, or was emerging back then, actually. And I think, that kind of set me on this path to wanting to do something different. I think, looking back on it, I used to be responsible for, really significant budgetary spend. And I think if I'd known what I know now, I would have spent that completely differently. So I think, for me, it was a great, almost like a second sort of innings, really, to get back out there and to see a whole new tranche of innovation coming to market, some very, very smart stuff. Obviously, we were in the mature stages of the internet, so we know digital inside out. And there are now a whole new generation of tech-based solutions, artificial intelligence-based solutions, which are making real sense of it. I came across a great friend and mentor, a guy called Sahir Sidhom, who runs a company called Heatmaps, and was privileged enough to join the kind of Heatmaps network. And we spent a lot of time over the previous sort of 3 years, going around the world, basically looking at the markets, how they were operating, hacking new business solutions based on forecast predictions. So thinking about what the world's going to look like in 30 years' time, let alone right now, and starting to anticipate what kind of things were going to change? What was our relationship with consumer going to be like? And I think, coming back from all that, it set me on a path thinking, I don't want to boil the ocean. I just want to produce something that has a genuine meaning. And we were lucky enough to kind of have been working on Dragonfly for a little while. And it suddenly struck me that actually I should just put my efforts completely into this proposition. As I think many people are now looking at artificial intelligence solutions, and they are in their intrinsic nature fundamentally quite simple. They're just incredibly accurate at what they do because they're based on very, very smart architectures, which are basically replicating what human beings try to do, but just do it faster and more accurately. And that applies pretty much to everything I've seen so far. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey of discovery. Ironically, I actually started with a little mini expedition where I thought after my last sort of full-time role, I was just going to go and paddle around the wilderness of the Algonquin National Reserve for 2 or 3 weeks, just to clear my mind and have a really good think about what I wanted to do when I came back. And at the end of that, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to throw myself into this and really go for it.
That's excellent.
How long ago was that? Like, when did you decide to really dive into it?
So in about, I was trying to think when I left my last full-time role. So I was working for a company called Heatmaps, who are a big B2B trade business here in the UK. I think I finished with them in about 2011. So it was probably, just at the beginning of this decade. So, yeah, I mean, and a lot's happened. I mean, certainly a lot of the early stuff was fairly sort of clunky and embryonic. But as the kind of the years progressed, I mean, we were starting to see some really interesting solutions. Around 2015, I kind of hooked up with a business called Black Swan, who are an amazing trend prediction business. So they basically they listen to not just the internet, they listen to data at scale, and they start to predict and forecast, what's likely to happen. And I love all this kind of probability mapping. This whole notion of there are preferable futures that we can look at, the ones which are the sort of the extremes of if everything is data led, how would we actually feel about functioning in societies where all of our decisions are made based on data? You could argue you get a much more robust, factually based set of guidelines to operate within, but by human nature, we probably don't like the idea of that. So the alternative extreme is to sort of back away from it and reject all technology and all data. A kind of preferable future is somewhere mapped between the two extremes, where we find the best of both worlds, in effect.
That's great. So I'm curious, right? You said this is important. This is maybe where I should spend the second innings of my career. How did you decide about putting the team together? Did you started building an MVP? Where did you go from there when you realized that this idea is real?
So we were actually running a number of propositions at the same time. So I had a very early bit of a false start, and I think I'm very happy to talk about the highs and lows. So the false start was the one that didn't work very well, which was called TechSource, and that was a platform, actually, ironically enough, designed to try to identify all of the emerging technologies out there and to allow businesses effectively to engage with propositions that they might not stumble across if they were searching under normal search terms. The challenge for a lot of innovation companies and AI and technology-based solutions is, they've identified a solution to a problem which they understand intrinsically and have solved it. The problem is they have to sell it into a market which is sometimes culturally and intellectually in a different place to where they are. So they may think it's superb, and they may think that every big FMCG or retailer in the world should be using it. But the reality is these businesses take time to adapt and adopt new technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of TechSource was it was enabling people to kind of get out there and see what was happening. And we had about 8,000 companies around the world listed on this platform. And I thought this was generally going to be fantastic. Trouble was, I think we were probably a little bit ahead of ourselves. And what I learned there was, building the right team and a team you can genuinely trust, rely on, was really important. I was a bit let down by those guys. So we kind of had another go. And actually, I think that's probably one of my fundamental principles now for, working per se is, hey, you've got to work with people you really like and trust, because you're going to have some good times and you're going to have some really bad times, and you've got to be able to iron out both without, losing the plot. I think the other thing is you've got to believe that what you've got has a relevance to a market, and it's a market you properly understand. I think, having consulted into a lot of startups prior to actually starting my own, you kind of get a sense they're really, really amazing people, fantastic, super smart, they've got phenomenal strategic and development capabilities, but they've created a solution without actually asking the market whether it needs it. But it's really hard to sell those kind of propositions back in retrospectively, because you're trying to make something fit. Whereas if you started by collaborating with market you're trying to solve problems for, your solution is just going to be that much better. Besides which, if you have founding kind of client partners you work with on that basis, chances are they'll come on the journey with you. They'll feel invested in what you've developed, and they'll feel like they have a kind of, an intellectual share in what it's doing anyway. So I think great people, a real sense of relevancy, understanding of the market you're selling into, and a bit of trust and belief.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really valuable advice. And I did want to ask, how did you come up with the name Dragonfly AI?
It's a brilliant story. So it was nurtured originally in Black Swan. So the story started back in 2010 with a piece of academic research. We can come back to that if you would like to later. It was kind of sheltered within Black Swan, where I and my co-founder David were both working, also with our chairman Richard. So we were all part of that fabric. And the chief exec, who's a superb guy called Steve King, very charismatic Welshman, he set us the task of creating a name for the proposition. It was originally called Design Navigation Analysis, which I think was a name generated in order to have the acronym DNA. So it was Visual DNA was its original point of perspective. Steve just said to us, look, we need a better name. It's dry, it's boring, it doesn't have any sort of sense of business to it. So we came up with millions of names and presented them all to him, and somebody just said, it's a bit like a dragonfly's eye. And he said, I like that. You know why I like it? Because it's dragons, and dragons come from Wales. So that's why like nothing else other than Steve's kind of immense patriotism for being Welsh.
I love that.
We really liked it. It's a great name.
Yeah, I love the Welsh roots there. No, that's awesome. So as you started fleshing this out, did you find a customer or a client that you thought, let's do a MVP, a minimum viable product with them, let's try this out? Or did you build the whole thing out and then take it to market? How did you approach going into the market?
Yeah, so interesting. So just to kind of backpedal a little bit, Dragonfly is born out of a piece of academic research, really, really interesting, but basically was looking at how to give robotic devices human visual interpretation skills so they could operate in their contexts effectively using human decision making. What it did was kickstarted a piece of research which lasted about 4 or 5 years. And basically, it kind of came up with, eventually, the mathematical formula that the brain uses in its biological state. So we call that, system 1 precognitive state, as opposed to system 2, our learned cultural, emotional, top-down responses. The research was presented to, effectively, to the commercial sector by a university called Queen Mary University London. In, I think it was about 2014, 2015, and they basically came to market and said, look, we've got the mathematical formula that the brain uses to identify and prioritize what it sees in that zero moment of truth. So we said, well, that's amazing. If you've got that, we can bake that into a piece of software. So what we did was we turned that initially into an iOS application. And, to be fair, it was a bit of a clunky user experience, but it did some pretty amazing things. It commuted that maths into heat mapping with some indexing metrology over the top of it. Basically meant you could ingest anything you wanted to, look at it, and it would give you an instant view of what the human brain is seeing in sequence. So very, very powerful kind of concept. If you can, basically tell a brand, we can show you what your consumers see first in any channel, in any content environment. And we lived with the iOS device for quite a long time. In fact, one of our early stage clients who we still work with and actually has gone really well is a big global pharmaceutical company. They were very brave. Their Shopper Science Lab was based in London. They could see the value in the iOS proposition, and they started to adopt it, to look at everything, the proper packaging design, to in-store marketing. So all the traditional shopper marketing stuff that they've been doing through human panels, they started to test using Dragonfly and realized they were getting an immediate response using a piece of technology that was saving them, time and money on having to bring together human panels and then try to understand what, a diffuse group of 40 people were going to tell you about what they could see, whereas we gave them an instant view saying, these are the 5 things you see first. So really short kind of stuff. So we were then, as a result of kind of, our ability to kind of, build out on that sort of account, able to get a lot of insight. So coming back to that point I was trying to make about why it's really important to understand your market, a lot of the early features we started developing were based on input we were getting from our client partner, which I think is absolutely the way to build tech. So you build it with the partner who's going to end up using it. That way you make it superbly relevant for purpose, really. It wasn't until probably we moved Dragonfly into a new co. So in 2018, we went through the processes of sort of shifting it, novating it from the various different entities that had interest in it into a new company, which launched in January of 2019. Thus, Dragonfly AI was kind of born. And we started with the iOS app. And we started then to build out our product suite. We've now got an amazing product portfolio, which includes a Google Chrome extension, so we can look at live web assets. We've got effectively a web app or a kind of online desktop studio, so we can look at what the iOS app was doing, but in the context of production environments. We've got a motion analytics version, so we can test rich media, video, TVCs, and we've also built our APIs and SDKs so that we can integrate into other production environments. So we've come on a long way, but it took a while to kind of get traction and to really understand how to build this right. And I think the result is we've now got a product which we were actually told by a VC is the market leading visual analytics product in our sector, which that's not just us being a bit immodest, that's actually a third party who understands this stuff telling us how it is, which is really good to hear.
That's absolutely amazing. So as I think about it, did you license the technology from Queen Mary? Or did you just say, okay, this is a good foundation and we can use this and build something based on that? I'm just curious if there was a tech transfer. And I know a lot of great ideas sometimes happen in a university environment, but they get buried in research. So what was your experience there?
Well, the Queen Mary's have a really good knowledge transfer partnership and a phenomenally, good commercial director who leads that function. We always collaborated with them from the very outset. The Dragonfly, the original research was conducted by a guy called Professor Peter McCowan, Dr. Hamit Soyel. Sadly, Peter died last year. We've decided to kind of maintain his honour in our ongoing business by naming our R&D lab after him. So the McCowan lab is basically where we do all of our R&D now. His colleague, Hamit Soyel, Dr. Hamit Soyel, is actually our chief data scientist. So he's fundamentally engaged with the business, and we think that's really important. So he continues to do R&D for Dragonfly, but within the context of the commercial environment. So he's, again, understanding what the needs of clients are and helping us to build around those as well. So that works really neatly for us. The relationship with Queen Mary is commercially structured. So, we license the IP. It's academic IP. We've now commuted that into effectively, engineering IP. So the code is more robust. The code is secure. It's designed for heavy load. And we kind of carry on. Our plan is with our reasonably complex group of shareholders, because we do obviously have investment from Black Swan, who are part of that early part of our story, with Queen Mary's. We've also done subsequently some friends and family fundraising, but we've also done a corporate partnering deal with a big UK company here called Capita, and all of these have helped shape our direction. I think that's another really important feature of these kind of journeys is the people you make friends with along the way will be part of your future, and they will influence the direction of travel. So as with your team that you choose, the people you choose to partner with are equally important to you.
Yeah, this sounds very, very exciting. And I know sometimes pictures worth 1,000 words. And we've talked about it. Would it be possible to see a quick demo, a quick look at what you have and how it works? Because how you're leveraging neuroscience to predict how the content influence someone or their experience is absolutely amazing. So it would be awesome if we can see some of that in action.
Okay, well, let's try to. I mean, I think they always say, children and animals and live tech demos are always a bit of a disaster. Well, let's I'm going to grab the screen for a minute, and I'm going to show you what I can show you online, which is basically our web app, so our desktop application, and our Google Chrome tool, which so fingers crossed with touch of a button. Well, it says you've disabled attendee screen sharing, so you might have to flick a switch at your end.
Yeah, you can. I think. Let me make sure you're enabled for that.
All right. So hopefully you can see my Google browser now, my Chrome browser. So what I'm going to do is just basically launch our platform, and there it is. Oh, strangely enough, there's some material I prepared before we started, just on the off chance we might have a look at it. But we can pretty much look at anything we like. So basically, in here, I can run multiple projects, so you get a sense of the range of the sort of things we do: digital asset analysis, point of sale, product packaging, you name it. So what I've done is I've just lifted a few screenshots from your website, which I thought might be quite interesting. So they're very easy to import. I just to add one, I just go up here, select, open, and then that should allow me to add that. So you see what I'm trying to express here is just how simple this is to use and how easy.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to pull up the page here, and I can do a couple of things with this. I mean, if I wanted to, I could test one version versus another version. So I could put an A/B test in if I needed to. I won't do that. I'm just going to have a look at it. So this isn't particularly complex in terms of color design, but sometimes in visual interpretation, we find that colorways can be a bit difficult. So we have this button here, which is an opacity map, which basically strips away all of the color bias and just shows us monochromatically where the attention hotspots are. So what we'll see is fairly evidently the things that the brain should be seeing first. So your copy content and about the host is doing quite well. I'd say from an initial glance that some of the actual creative components are a little bit below what we would see as kind of recognizable. When I go back to my heat map, now what we'll do is we'll apply the algorithm to all of this content. So just bear in mind it's using the same process that our brain does as we engage with content. And we do this all of the time. So as we're making our way through the world, we're constantly trying to work out what's important to us. This is almost like a subliminal function of the brain helping us to identify the significant things we're looking at. What the heat map will show us is low and high color temperatures. So the high color temperatures, so typically the reds are the things that we see first. The things in blue are the things that we tend not to see. So certainly in some environments, these could suggest that we're basically going to disregard something we can't see. Queen Mary's in their research proved a couple of things. The first was that the biological algorithm the brain uses is a universal. It's the same across the whole of humanity. So this is how human beings see content. The second is that we use 5 neural pathways in this process, and they are consistent with human logic. So when you kind of become familiar with Dragonfly, quite often what you see, you understand why you're seeing it. We use these 5 pathways. The first is our ability to distinguish between light and dark. The second is textural differences. The third is kind of contrast and edges. The fourth is shape, cluster, and perspective. And the fifth is patterns and orientation. We're amazingly good at seeing anomalies and patterns. And the example we sometimes use is if you look at imagine a piece of repeating wallpaper design where one of the icons is shifted by, say, 45 degrees, we instantly see the anomaly. We're brilliant at detecting these things. So now what the algorithm will do, it then takes that knowledge and it commutes it into a heat map, which at a touch of a button I get it. And it gives me quite a different read. So clearly here suggests that the about the host is getting good recognition, and something down here behind your ear, Ari, is clearly very important. But looking at that in its sort of singular instance is useful. But what I want to do now is really understand it. So I can put a metrology layer over it, and I can effectively invite the AI to show me the attention hotspot. So what it'll do, it should call out the top 5 or 6 areas of impact in red boxes with a number, and the number is basically the significance of those. So we scale from 0, no salience, to 100, which is the highest. So I hit my button here, and it instantly shows me where the 5 top hotspots are. And you have probably the world's most famous ear, which is great. Down here, there's a piece of content where you were chief data scientist at Knowledgent. and then some other copy here. It may not be quite what you're hoping for, but what it does typically is we use this iteratively to look at whether the content's doing what we want it to, and if it's not, we can keep using the tool until we've optimized the things we want people to see. Interestingly, what the green squares are showing is they kind of talk about the digestibility of the overall content. So basically what they're doing is they're aggregating all of that knowledge, and they're saying the digestibility scores just around 50 out of 100, which is what we'd expect a normal content environment to look like. Below that is good. Above it, it's getting a bit complicated. In retail, sometimes we see a retail environment where those median scores are scoring up into the 70s. It just says the brain is struggling to contend with the amount of information it's trying to visually process. So that's basically Dragonfly on the web app. I just thought it might be quite nice to have a look at the Chrome extension whilst you're interested.
And that's amazing, right? And I love it, right? Because I can see how it's and that those are the places my eye go towards too. If I go on the page, I do see the picture, I do see about the host just jumps out, and the blue, the purple box on the right hand side.
The other thing is I can pull out a region and look at that. So if I just draw another one, you kind of get a sense. If I'm looking at content in blocks of information, I can see how significant they are, one versus another. And again, this is really useful when you're trying to ensure that certain things are getting prominence. So let's do one more. You kind of get a sense of it. So really super easy to use, and you can almost see there now the priority of the information being delivered is your our story at the top. Then we go to your brains behind region 1, and then we're going down to about the host, and then the photograph of Barry.
Perfect. So take us from here, right? How do they, now you know what the hotspots are, where do you take your clients next?
So we train the capability typically. So in some instances, and we do find sometimes that adopting smart AI, although this is genuinely very, very simple to use, and you can probably get to grips with it within the space of about an hour of training, actually the confidence of making decisions regardless is something that requires you to learn and trust it. Typically, if you've been using other types of tools before, say it could be human panels or eye tracking devices, but now you've got something which is super instant, super fast. There's always that slight doubt in your mind as to whether this is doing the same job, and the answer is it is. It's just doing it very fast and super smart. So what we train our clients to look at is, say for instance, here we're looking at these 4 content blocks and we want them to work in a different way. We would suggest that you use within your gift the ability to work with those 5 neural pathways, so light and dark, texture, edges, shape, perspective, and patterns, to test new theories and new principles. So Dragonfly won't tell you the answer. That's the beauty of it in some ways. It doesn't replace humans in the creative process. It's more like a kind of a human-in-the-loop AI. It helps you to understand whether what you're trying to deliver is being delivered, and if not, it'll help you to iterate until you've absolutely got it nailed down the way you want it to be.
So, Mark, is there an industry that you targeted while you were getting your product off the ground when you first started?
Yeah, well, not so much targeted as just kind of how we kind of naturally gravitated. I think our principal forte is definitely shopper marketing and currently e-commerce. There's been a massive surge in e-commerce. I mean, I think the predictions we're looking at are suggesting some of these big businesses are really, really, doubling down on their newfound sort of online customers. And I don't think that customer behavior is going to change swiftly back to anything closer to what was normal before. So I think we've got very used to using the internet for pretty much all our purchasing. So it makes eminent sense for us to help brands to optimize their e-commerce environments. If I just flip on, if I may, to another one. So this is just a digital aisle at Tesco's. What we can do now with our Chrome extension, which is kind of smart, is we can launch, let's have a look at, a subject placed on a Friday afternoon. The drinks aisle, the spirits, I'm going to look at whiskey. So now what I can do is I can actually launch Dragonfly live over this site, and it will enable me to understand how these assets are performing. So perfect for pre-testing content before distribution. I'm just going to take that off for a moment. So there we're now looking at the feed from Tesco's site. It's a dynamic engagement, so we can see our way through the browser. What I'm able to do now, though, is to launch Dragonfly over it. So my heat map is now live, and I can look at a variety of different measures. So down here, I've got 3 that are most important to us. The probability of perceptions. What percentage of people are going to see the products on that page? Knowing that our index is 0 to 100, obviously, if you're in the top card of there, you're going to be commanding attention. If you're not, you've got a problem with your product. Share of attention talks about the distribution of visual attention across the content. And the local attention score talks about the average level of saliency given by that unique piece of content, in these instances, whiskey skews. So I'm going to go to probability of perception, because it's the one that's most easy to understand, basically. And what I can now do is I can hit a button, and it will immediately show me how those products are performing online. So clearly, if I am the brand manager for Southern Comfort, my product's scoring 51. Not so good, because it's hardly getting recognized. Our view is below 50. It might as well be invisible. Jura, which is a fine single malt whiskey from the west coast of Scotland, scores 93. So clearly that's grabbing my attention. Something Jura have done in that is working better for them. And I can continue to work through this. So again, Glen Moray is scoring really well. Jameson's at 36. It is effectively a bit of a waste of time. But I can basically start to really deconstruct this page with Dragonfly and look at all the components until I've got a complete understanding, effectively, of how that page is functioning. So I have within my gift now the ability to look at the optimization of my digital assets live in any instant. So anything I can ingest, I can look at. And as I say, we've got motion versions, so we're starting to look at things like sports sponsorship branding in live events. Not that there are a huge number of those taking place at the moment, but nonetheless, the industry is really interested in whether it can come up with better metrics than just how many screen seconds does my logo get. Now we can tell them how salient is it as well. So the applications are pretty extensive. I suppose we are keen to branch out of our core areas, which are basically shopper and e-commerce. We're doing more and more and more with agencies, and they think they're seeing this as a way to do everything from validating their approach to conceptual visual design for brands through to providing new forms of consultancy services which are helping them to accelerate and optimize the brand partners they're working with.
That's great. That's excellent. So in terms of your business model, is it a subscription that your clients buy? Does it come with consulting? How do you engage on a business side?
So with a new client, typically we start with a kind of a proof of concept type engagement where they might buy a single user license or a couple of users, which we train those people. We work alongside them. We typically find projects we can work on. So it could be packaging design projects, or it could be digital assets that are being re-engineered or transformed. We help them to understand how to use it. One of our new clients is the prestige retailer in London, Harrods. They're looking at how they can use Dragonfly in the context of their premium visual merchandising in store, now that they're beginning to reopen to the public. So there are lots of different ways of working with us, but it typically starts with a proof of concept. We charge based on licenses. The license value is commensurate with the number of licenses you use and the length of time. The training is provided by our kind of super user who's based in London. We can get people up and running on this within a few hours if they're really, really keen to get moving. But typically, the delay tends to be on the side of the partner, because what they're trying to do is to work out where something like this, which theoretically is quite disruptive to the way they work, it's a new thing. It's got some quite radical instant views. It can challenge quite dramatically what you're looking at. What we found also is that we need to land it with a bit of care with the creative community. It's not there to mark homework. It's there to augment and add to their existing experience and genius in terms of their creativity. What it'll do, quite often, it will validate their thinking already. But our view is if it adds a 5% sizzle to a piece of creative work or an online experience, then in most instances that's an awful lot more than they're going to get from pretty much anything else they're working on.
And where do you see the future of Dragonfly AI?
Wow. Well, I mean, I'd love it to be getting traction across the brand space, across the retail space. I mean, I think, we have so many new challenges to face as a result of what we've all been through over the last 6 months that I think we're going to have to innovate, out of nature. There's no other way. I think, we've been really cautious through it. I think, it's been a challenging time. I mean, we've done okay, and we're not being modest. We've worked hard. We've doubled down on our tech to build that out, and we've landed some new business, which is really good. But, we appreciate it's been a really tough time. So we've also been trying to be as helpful as possible to clients, giving them help, support, trying to help them to, solve problems if we can. And we felt that actually that's been really helpful. When I remember I was head of brand for a Scottish bank, which limits it to 2 here in the UK, back in 2008 at the last recession. And I can remember the chief exec, very, very wise words. He said, it's the customers you put your arm around now will be your customers for the next 10 years. He's absolutely right. Put it out there. Sometimes you don't have to make money instantly. What you have to do is to solve a problem, create a value, and be part of that solution. And then inevitably people come back and go, hey, they were the really good guys who just helped us. And I think that's a really important part of our culture is that culture.
That is great advice indeed. So now let's just looking back at your experience starting with Black Swan and then building this out. What advice or what lessons learned do you have that anyone listening to this can benefit from, say, if they're thinking about it more as an entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I'd say choose your partners carefully. Choose them well, because you are going to have to work with them for at least 3 to 5 years. And as I said, I think some of those times will be good and some of them will be difficult. Do things based on evidence and facts. And I think this is a really important leadership principle anyway. The days of hero leaders, I think, are long gone. The idea that somehow somebody with amazing charisma can kind of jump out of a box and tell you what to do. Like, people need to trust. And that comes right down to the fundamentals of setting up and running a new business. Base it on trust, base it on your ability to adapt, be resilient, be courageous, all those kind of fundamental human virtues, which sometimes are quite hard to get reference for until you're thrown into some, chaos and have to try and sort it out. That's when you see, the real qualities of the people around you. I think, it's all about building intrinsic commitment. You've got to have a business that believes everyone's pulling their weight. You have no passengers. You all fervently are trying to make it a better place, a better organization. And don't give up. I mean, I think, the problem we see in so many environments from, almost from business development through to just, business growth generally is it's very, very easy to give up. And when you talk to people about things like sales engagement, which is, it can be a bit of a grubby term, but at the end of the day, we're all in business. We have to sell things. That's what we're here to do. We hope our proposition matches the market. So that's really important to understand it. But also, nobody's going to buy on the strength of you sending them an email. You have to build a rapport. You have to have a bit of trust. I think, what we've established is people buy from us because they're trusting our advice and they believe the tool is a phenomenal iteration of academic genius and actually has proof points which prove that it does what it says. So I think, be courageous, but don't be foolhardy. The kind of qualities that we look for, obviously, competency and confidence, that the people have the strength to make decisions, but will ask for support if they need it. To be consistent, I mean, I think one of the words that distresses me most in the technology space is the word pivot. In my mind, pivot means you changed your mind. You set out to do one thing and now you're doing something totally different. So I don't think businesses should be pivoting, because typically pivots are because you didn't get the estimate right in the first place. So you're now to change your mind. So do the due diligence, make sure you understand what you're trying to serve, the market you're in, and deliver against that, and you should be okay. And I think a bit of maturity, we're lucky. We laugh sometimes because we're all kind of, you can tell by the grey hairs, we're all a bit older. So we call ourselves a grown-up rather than a startup because we've already been there and done some of these things before. And we're very lucky because that helps us to to bring the kind of the qualities of our sort of young technologists and the experience of our mature business leaders to kind of create a really positive, harmonious environment where we get things done.
I love that. It's about the relationships.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think in my career experience, it's always been that way. Your license depends on your network and your reputation and cash out. It's what people think about you. And I think I've tried pretty hard most of my career, to not get that wrong. And I think there are tools out there which really help us to do that. Now I think for me, LinkedIn is probably about the most useful business tool I think I've ever come across.
Wow. Yeah. You can tell through your business too, and just through talking to you. So that connection.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the clock here. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm thinking we make this the rapid fire, and we can do this. You're the first person we're doing this with, so forgive us. But I think the goal here is to capture the essence of all the things you've mentioned into a 10-minute that we can share. So let me start with questions here. So thinking about your idea, right? What triggered you to say that this is the idea that we can potentially build a business on?
I think having spent quite a lot of time over the years looking at lots of great ideas, I've become better at identifying the ones that are genuine. And I saw this, and the minute I saw it, I just thought, I get this. If this does what it says it does, I don't think there's anything quite like it. And adoption, I think, will be very straightforward because people will just understand it. It's sensible AI that people just look at it and they get it.
And can you take us through the artificial intelligence you use and what Dragonfly AI does?
Yeah, so basically it uses a mathematical algorithm, which is basically scientific research that came out of a university called Queen Mary's. What they identified is the brain uses 5 neural pathways in the way that we biologically process visual information and prioritize it. Dragonfly basically replicates that. It means that anything you can ingest into it, we can use that formula to show you what the human brain is seeing first.
Great. How did you validate that there is a real market for what you have?
We spent a lot of our early years when we were being kind of nurtured within Black Swan, testing out with existing clients. We were lucky in the sense that we were in an already operational environment, so it was easier for us to take Dragonfly in to see clients that we already knew for other things, to show it to them and get their feedback. We found that sort of collaboration in its build out was really valuable. And we've kind of stuck with that ever since. We think the client input is vital to the development of our new features.
And you have a wide range of experience. Do you have advice for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Well, I'm sure I've got as many things wrong as I've got right over the years. I think, the degree in hindsight is that you kind of spot things a bit easier. I just say, believe in yourself. My fundamentals are work with people you trust and like, and only work on things that you genuinely believe have a value. And I think you can seldom go wrong with that as the fundamental truth.
What advice do you have for industry leaders that are in a position where they can define and set the stage for what future should look like? Do you have any advice given you're working on something that's cutting edge?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line between wholesale innovation and resistance to change. I believe that it's probably not my word, but I think we're in the foothills of a crisis that's going to go on for a while yet. I think leaders need to think sensibly, but again, it comes back to the fundamental thought within really powerful leadership is it has to be based on fact and evidence. So, make your decisions not based on whimsical emotions or what your son told you or your daughter told you, which is typically the focus group of one we've heard quite a lot about in the past. Is listen carefully, assimilate the knowledge you've got, and then you're paid to make a judgment. And when you make that judgment, you're responsible for it. So own it and deliver it.
And when you launched Dragonfly AI, was there an industry that stuck out that used your services and product the most? And which industry do you think needs it the most?
Well, I think we started, interestingly, we started in effectively pharma product packaging and shopper marketing, and that's definitely been a mainstay of what we do. We are now seeing many, many more agencies taking an interest in it. FMCG, I think, is beginning to understand that it needs a new type of relationship with consumers. So, the ability to kind of understand what visual connections you can make with a consumer is really important. I think the industry that needs us most genuinely is probably retail bricks and mortar. If you look at the kind of the forecast transformation of e-commerce and the growth rates it's got, if you're a retail owner in a physical space, we can probably help you quite significantly in terms of engagement. But I think we've all got a long road ahead of us. And my view is collaboration. Connect out there. The best way to market is to connect with other entrepreneurs in other businesses. We learned that from pretty much everything we worked on, from Hackmasters to Dragonfly. It's about the networks you operate in, and it's about your reputation and how you basically engage and what you can do to support.
Okay, so looking back, given the Dragonfly is doing really well now, if you could redo one thing, what would be that one thing that you would redo?
I would have done it sooner. Simple as that. Instead of, I think perhaps some of the other things that we were doing, because I think, we worked on a number of different propositions for a period of time. I think, in my heart, I could tell that Dragonfly was the one which was going to go fast, and we could probably have gone a bit faster, a bit earlier if we made that decision sooner. But I mean, at the time, it was exciting working on lots of different fronts, and we didn't really know which one was going to be successful. That we've been working through a strategy program recently, and we have an exercise in it called a pre-mortem, which is basically looking at the principal reasons why a business has failed in 3 to 5 years' time, so that we can then mitigate against them and identify the trigger for when they're maybe showing themselves. And I think, even in a small-scale environment, in a startup, it's worth thinking about your 3-year plan quite early, not least because when you do start to attract investments, whether that's private or VC or whatever, is you will need to prove that you've thought through not just this fantastic product you've got, but how you're going to scale it, how you're going to grow it.
Mm-hmm. Was there a moment that you had this aha idea or aha moment, or maybe a company inspired you with AI?
Well, I think, yes. And I'll tell you what, it was all right. I used to, every quarter, when I was chief marketing officer for the British Army for about 10 years. Every quarter, I'd have this research company come in, and I slightly dread it. It would be a 4-hour research debrief where we would sit in front of 124 slides, and each one would have about 10 questions and answers on it from our target audience. It was a really vital piece of research, but there was so much of it. I just remember sitting there then, thinking the way my brain works is I know which things I'm looking for. When I see a small percentile shift in something significant, that's for me a problem. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could just kind of capture that knowledge? I don't have to do it. We've got almost like an automated service that just says, these are the shifts, these are the things you should be looking out for. It would have saved me, a huge amount of time. And actually would have got to the essence of what I needed to do faster. And I think what happens is that smart operators kind of learn that's how they work. You've got to understand your metrics, because the metrics give you the insight that helps you to make the decision. But it's a rare art. And I think if you can automate some of these things, which I've heard fantastic, AI that now it has the equivalent capability of an ophthalmic consultant with 10 years experience, can now look at the human eye and can give you the same readout that the consultant would give you in seconds, which is democratizing access to vital services. If you're about to go blind, you don't want to wait 6 months for an appointment. You want to know tomorrow what you can do to help. So I think these are the kind of applications where, AI will start to gain real credibility. I mean, I think, as with all things, there's a bit of a fear factor about it. Will it make me redundant? Will it replace me? Will it end the way I know the world today? The answer is no, it's going to augment and help. The reality is if you engage and help to shape it, it'll be even better for you.
Thank you, Mark. This was amazing. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Super informational, and we really, truly appreciate your wisdom. So thank you for being on with us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to join you guys. Yeah.